Okay, welcome to chapter 23. This is kind of the introduction. Chapter 23, we're going to look at pages 1158 through 1166. We're going to talk a little bit about centralized and decentralized operations and how they work. Then we're going to talk about how we account for cost centers and profit centers. And we'll look at a couple of problems real quick too. Okay, so first and foremost, the first page of the chapter, 1158, just talks about centralized versus decentralized operations. Effectively, the biggest thing you need to know is what this comes down to more than anything else is where the decisions are made and who's responsible to report and who's responsible to control both revenues and costs and return on investment, depending on which type of center we're talking about. So is the person responsible the person at the highest level, or is the person responsible the person at a mid-level, or is this person responsible someone at a lower level? The centralized company, everything happens at the top. So all the big decisions, everything occurs all in one place, and that's at the very top of the organization. Those kinds of decisions. So an example of this that you see in the real world is, larger corporations look pretty much the same because those large decisions are made at the central location and made for everyone. The good thing about that is that means that, when you walk into one of those places, it's the same thing. You're not out of, you don't feel out of sorts or like you don't know what's going on. Instead, it's, the same thing that it was everywhere else, every time you walked into one somewhere else. The bad thing about centralization, the disadvantages of centralization, I'll go through all of them on page 1159. So advantages of decentralization allows managers closest to the operation to make decisions. It means they can make quicker when things are changing quickly. That's a good thing, like they are right now. Provides excellent training for managers. Managers get to be better at their job because they have more responsibility. Allows managers to become experts in their areas of operation. Helps retain managers. People like to feel important, and the more important they feel, the more likely they are to stick around. It also improves creativity and customer relations. Disadvantages is that decisions made by managers could negatively impact the profits, especially if you have a manager who either isn't great at being a manager or they just are not experienced. There's lots of reasons, but it could cause problems. And also you could duplicate assets and expenses. So if you have a certain, number of skill sets across your organization and you're using them all in, all the different areas, when you could centralize that activity and make everyone use the same group, then that would cause, less duplication of work. Okay, sorry, I don't know if the video is going to jump or what, but I had to pause it for a second to, my daughter came in the room. So page 1160, responsibility accounting for cost centers. So a cost center manager has responsibility for controlling costs. For example, the supervisor of the power department has a responsibility for the cost of providing power. The cost center manager does not make decisions concerning sales, the amount of fixed assets invested in the center. So these are areas that are only costs and not revenue. So it gives a good example of a university. The whole university, we've got the example they have. We don't have a college of engineering, but we'd have a college of business, and we have a college of arts and sciences, and that's a university-wide. Then we have the individual college or school. We call it a school of business, but same thing, where we have our department of marketing, department of accounting, department of management. We're so small, the department of accounting, for example, is me. You're looking at the entire department of marketing, or I'm sorry, of accounting. But this works the same way on a grander scale. There could be 10 people in the department of accounting or 10 people in the department of marketing. But I have no responsibility for revenue. Does that mean that if I see a student who's looking for a place to, be a student, do I promote Newman? Yes, absolutely. But it's out of my control and not something that I have any power over. So that shows that my department is simply a cost center, and school business is simply a cost center. Our main responsibility is to control costs. So that means when I am looking at a report, like on page 1161, really the only thing I'm looking at is what they spent and if there's any budget variance. We went over that in the last couple chapters, 21 and 22. So I'll kind of let you look through that. But just understand that the big thing there is that with a cost center, the only thing we can look at really is the cost, because it's the only thing they have responsibility for. Next, actually, We'll go look at problem. We'll look at brief exercise 23. Actually, no, we'll go back. I don't have a cost center one, I don't think. So we'll go back to this. Okay, 1163, profit center. Profit centers, on the other hand, are different than cost centers because they are they're responsible for revenues and expenses. But it is important to note that they're only responsible for their own controllable revenues and expenses. They don't have the they don't have the responsibility for all the overall profit of the organization. They only have the responsibility of what is within their area. Okay, so this could be a department. This could be, for example, manufacturing companies. If they manufacture 4 different products, one product could be a profit center. If that were the case, they would be not only responsible for the manufacturing costs of that product, they'd also be responsible for selling that product. If they're a cost center, they would only be responsible for controlling the cost of that product and wouldn't have anything to do with the sales. So that's kind of a differentiator. It's all about profit centers have both revenues and expenses that are their responsibility, but only the controllable revenues and the controllable expenses. I'm on page 1163. Okay,